Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Green Stormwater Infrastructure, Unfiltered Advice from Those in the Know. My name is Alyssa Knox. I'm a planner here in the Environment and Development Department of the North Central Texas Council of Governments, or NCTCOG, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. This webinar is hosted by NCTCOG and was prepared in cooperation with TCEQ and the US EPA. Some background first on what NCTCOG is. We are a voluntary association of local governments. It's one of 24 regional councils in the state. As part of NCTCOG's water quality management planning work, we host webinars on water quality topics every quarter. So if you do have any ideas on future topics, we'd love to hear them. Please feel free to send them to me. I'm putting my email in the chat, and it's on the screen. It's aknox@nctcog.org. A few housekeeping items before we jump into the webinar today. We are scheduled to last until 11:30 Central Standard Time. We're going to hear two presentations. After each presentation, there'll be some limited time for questions, and I'll share instructions on how to submit your questions at that time. Follow-up emails on today's webinar will be sent to all those who registered. If you didn't register, but you still want to receive the follow-up emails that include the presentation slides and a recording of the webinar, you can email me at the email in the chat. The webinar has also been approved for 1.5 continuing education credits through the Texas Floodplain Management Association. If you need a certificate as proof of your attendance to submit, please email me at the email provided. The presentation slides and recording, in addition to being emailed, will be posted under the green banner called Webinars on NCTCOG's website here, which I am putting in the chat right now, and it's also on your screen. Okay. So to go over the agenda for today, we are going to hear first from Michelle Wood-Ramirez, who will present installation and maintenance of green stormwater infrastructure on the Tarrant Regional Water District rainscapes, and Charriss York, who will share with us 2 case studies of green infrastructure in Houston, Texas, Exploration Green and MD Anderson. I want to introduce to you our first speaker, Michelle Wood-Ramirez. Michelle is an Urban Watershed Programs Coordinator at Tarrant Regional Water District. She works with and teaches about natural resources and ecological restoration, especially in nature-human interface with a focus on blue-green infrastructure. Majoring in entomology and maintaining a passion for wetlands, riparian areas, and benthics led to her work toward her master's degree in water management and hydrological science from Texas A&M University, focusing on urban stormwater, GSI, and LID. Michelle is passionate about ecological stewardship and environmental justice in the urban realm via hands-on education and mentoring. And now, Michelle, you may begin your presentation.
Good morning, and thank you so much for letting me come talk to you guys. I hope everyone's staying dry today. Like Alyssa said, my name is Michelle Wood-Ramirez, and I work for TRWD. And I'm going to talk about what TRWD is and what our Rainscapes program is, and so a whole bunch of background and why we do it. And then I'm going to go through, you could go to the next slide. I'm going to go through our program, and then one example at least of construction project for GSI, and then some lessons learned for maintenance as well, if we have enough time. So you'll have to, sorry, I have a lot of things you'll have to go through. Okay. So as you can see there, I put, you'll see this slide again in a little bit. So if you could keep going. So I wanted to start with a really big, broad picture. We're going to start with the Trinity Basin. The outline of the Trinity Basin is on the screen, and what this map is the different regions for the state water plan. So Texas population is almost 30 million. Half of those people live within the Trinity Basin. So, and as you can tell, a lot of the basin and those areas also will get their water from the Trinity River. So at least half of all Texans get their water from the Trinity River. You could go to the next slide. Yeah. So this is another slide that I had from TRA, and you can see the Dallas-Fort Worth area and then the Houston area down lower. So I'm going to talk about the DFW area. If you could go to the next one. So Tarrant Regional Water District, or TRWD, is a raw water supplier. and I'm in the environmental division in the watershed program. And I hope everyone knows what a watershed is, but TRWD owns and operates 4 reservoirs, and you can kind of see that there's 2 reservoirs on the top, Lake Bridgeport and Eagle Mountain, and 2 reservoirs on the eastern side of the map, Cedar Creek Reservoir and Richland Chambers Reservoir. And the area that drains into those is its watershed. And our team is, again, we're watershed coordinators. We do source water protection. So we don't have any jurisdiction in the watershed. We only have carrots and incentives, and we can offer our staff time and advice, but we want to amplify and promote best management practices for source water protection. And our office is located in Tarrant County. So if you click one more time, okay, click a few more times. So this is some really fun facts about our program in the district. The district does a lot more things than just watershed. We're a very, very tiny portion of the company. Ultimately, the water that we have in the reservoirs and pipelines is pumped back up to the top to Eagle Mountain and then distributed down through the water supply system. And ultimately, it serves over 2 million North Texas residents. And if you do one more, yeah. Okay, so we're going to focus on that little water drop. So our main office is in Fort Worth, pretty close to the stockyards. And what we've been able to do is whenever there's been an issue on campus with erosion or drainage or something like that, we've been able to lobby internally and get the retrofit done as green stormwater infrastructure. So we will focus on that piece. But I wanted to put everything in perspective of why stormwater is really important to not just our office and our company. Eventually, it all will fill up our reservoirs, but it's also really important that we can, the district also does flood management. There's a recreation component. We're a local sponsor of 27 miles of the floodway through Fort Worth. So the district does a lot of things, and being a good steward and leading by example is one of the things that we're able to do here. So we're going to look at what we've done on campus now that we know how we fit into the bigger system. If you could go to the next slide. All right, so the TRWD Rainscapes is, again, like I said, at the Fort Worth campus. And these polygons here on the screen are going to highlight the different best management practices that we have demonstrated here. So rain garden, the overlook is that pink area. That's just the name that we call it. That's not a BMP, but the overlook is, there's a big elevation change. That's where we've demonstrated our permeable concretes, our grass pavers. The rain garden is part of that system. And then what's brown is the stormwater landscape. So those are our native plants, native and adaptive plants, water conserving, irrigation, drip irrigation wherever possible. And we also have some rock channels and bioswales incorporated into those systems. So you'll see some videos of that later. And then we have the orange is a bioswale, and what I'm going to talk about for the construction lessons learned is our wetland, our redesigned stormwater wetland. So you could go one more. Okay. Yeah, if you can finish off that side, that'd be great. Perfect. Okay, that's fine. What are rainscapes? So we are calling this the TRWD rainscapes because I didn't come up with the word rainscape, but it's right. You think of landscape or xeriscaping or different things like that. So a rainscape is the design to reduce stormwater runoff. So ultimately, we want to make the stormwater an asset instead of something that we is affecting us negatively. If we think about rainwater or stormwater, that's really pretty much the same thing, but the connotation you have with it is different. So rainwater, rainscapes, rainwater harvesting, utilizing it as the asset that it is, and designing your landscape with the plants and the slope and the bioswales and everything like that so that we can hold it in place. Again, it slows down the hydrograph, the peak flow in the hydrograph. So flooding is really important in urban areas, but also the water quality improvements are really great. And then the added benefits is, again, recreation, air quality, heat island, wildlife. So there's a lot of benefits, but that's what a rainscape is. The link at the bottom is where I got the idea from, if you're interested, Montgomery County, Maryland. So rainscapes, another confusing thing, lesson learned, I guess, when talking to different groups, engineers and developers or homeowners, is that the scale kind of matters. So one BMP, one best management practice could be a rain garden. A homeowner might be able to do that in their front yard and have some rainwater harvesting. But rainscapes can actually be scaled higher. Campus level is what I'll show you guys today. But a campus or an HOA or things like that, we want to be able to discuss rain and flow and the water cycle as a system with ecology. So if we can connect people that way. So again, parks and open spaces, campuses, HOAs. So scale kind of comes into play as well. And why we do it, I might have hit on that already. So why we do it on campus with TRWD, we want to demonstrate functional, beneficial, attractive. You can go, is there one more? Yeah, so those are our targeted audiences. We literally want to target everyone. So, but that's why we do it. We want to be recording not only the water quality benefits, but how much it costs and things like that, so that we're not promoting something that's not feasible. We want to find what's feasible and what's sustainable and what's resilient. So the next slide. Here is some really beautiful aerial shots. So that is downtown Fort Worth in the background with the Trinity River right next to our campus. So our campus is built on an overbuild of the levee system, and you can keep going. So I'm hoping this video will play because it's really, really amazing how
Sorry, did you want me to play it now or let you finish what you're saying first?
Yeah, I'll just finish really quickly. It's just
Okay.
it's easier to see it with the drone footage before and after. When I'm doing this presentation live, I'm talking over the video and I just realized that I couldn't do that. So yes, I'll just let you watch the video. Thanks, guys. Okay, perfect. I'm glad I could pause that. So I hope you guys saw, if you wanted to go back and look at the video, probably around 2.5 minutes is where we had what it looked like before and what it looked like afterwards for some of those places. So I'm gonna go, can I go to the next slide? Perfect. So I really like the drone footage because I think it's such a transformation. I'm really proud of this project, and I'm really excited about wetlands. So that's why I really love to show the video, because these still photos don't really do it justice. So the problem, we're going to jump in the case study. The problem for TRWD was that it was a detention basin, but it was malfunctioning. It was holding water past the permitted time. And we got a warning, a letter from the city of Fort Worth explaining, hey, there's too much water here and it shouldn't be here. The other issue was maintenance, because we had a mowing contract and they would just mow even if it was still a little wet because they were told to mow. So it wasn't always functional or aesthetic. So we were able to come in 2017. My former boss, Tina Hendon, had started with the I don't know, paperwork, right, to figure out what was happening and how could we re-permit, instead of just, you know, we wanted to figure out what was happening and why, but also, can we make this better than it was? Can we make this into something, a feature again, instead of something that's just an eyesore? So the Rainscapes program, I say that it started in 2015, but the Overlook was the first piece that started, and that it was just called a demonstration area or a demonstration garden. So I rebranded probably right about this time because we kept doing, every year there's a question about the budget. So every year we have a set budget that it could change between 75,000 one year or 150,000 one year. But every year we can repair or retrofit for GSI on the campus, where we're doing it very small retrofits each year. So in 2017, we started looking for designs and things like that. And this redesigned stormwater wetland was finally built and installed at the spring of 2018. So this is what it looked like before. If you can go to the next picture. This is probably not 2019. So I will have to update that, but that's another shot during the winter. So the forested area there, that's not aquatic trees. So we were trying to figure out a way to keep the water on one side, get more detention than we had before. What had essentially happened was that the permits were stacked on top of each other, because we also built the campus in phases. So each of the permits, according to the city, were permitted for the same space, but ecologically that doesn't make sense. It's going to have twice as much water. So we were able to redo those permits with the city and get, I don't know if I can move this slide, and get some really cool ecological function out of it as well. So this is that same area over, but the design plan. So that undisturbed forest, I hope you guys can see through it, but it's kind of got that marbled look. The blue are the micropools. So there's 3 micropools that are constantly, or we attempt for them to be constantly wet, that can hold, they try to, on average, about 3 feet of water. That lighter green yellow is a trickle channel. So the start of it on that west side is an inflow structure so part of the parking lot will inflow there. And then there's also another inflow on that north side, which is where the bioswale from that Henderson building comes from north to south. So the cool thing is the trickle channel is about 1 foot deep. There's no slope change. There's just the depth. So each kind of area, I hope you can see, is each one of those areas is the type of plant that works best. So a fully aquatic plants, and then a little bit, the foot deep is plants that can have will be wet longer and can phytoremediate best in that kind of condition. And then that lighter green area, that shallow area, is what was going to be the original detention feature. So that part will be flooded in heavy rainfalls, but will be the one that drains within that 72 hours. So if you go one more, yeah. So this is the right after we planted, and we the hard part for this, there's a lot. That's why it's a case study. One of the issues is that the size of the project means we needed a lot of different people to help us with it. And there are people that grow wetland plants, but they might not install wetland plants. And they're certainly, if they're growing it somewhere else in the state, they're not going to come and maintain it for a year on our campus. So we had to coordinate growers and growing times, because it takes, 8 or 9 months to grow a plant. And then we had to coordinate who was going to excavate and do all of the dirt work, because the elevation was really important and really mattered. And then we had to have the people that can really good with like tractors and construction probably wouldn't want to plant and install it and maintain it. So that was one of the things. So I really like this shot, because you can see that we have the 2 of the micro pools and our forested area. You can go to the next slide. And this is what it looked like a year later. So if you can go to the next slide. And this was 2 years later, and we've also done some really cool retrofits on the left-hand side too. So we've taken out the DG, and those are the big flagstones, but they're inset a little bit so that they can be mowed over instead of having the edging that was around it. And then we have signage, and we also can see our cisterns now. So if you go one more. And I gave this presentation in September for grad school. So this was right after the drought. You can kind of see where the sprinkler lines are, those little circles on the green grass. We do have sprinklers, rotator sprinklers in here for just the summers when it's really, really dry. If you can go to the next one. Perfect. And if you want to click it, videos. That's the overflow for the cisterns, because the cisterns aren't really sized quite correctly, and they're very small cisterns. So I wanted you guys to see that there's an overflow there, and then that main inflow from our rock channel and our bioswale. You can go one more. This is after it's completely full, so the water level is above the micropool and above the trickle channel into the shallow zone, and that's our weir structure, so that we can, again, detain a little bit more water and adjust that hydrograph. What we see, why I'm showing this, is the lessons learned, because one of the first things that happened was that it was cutting through. So even though we had done a ton of measurements and plan, we needed to address the fact that the water was escaping and not going through the weir. So I wanted to show this. This is the outlet onto the road on the back. The next video, please. And this is, again, several years later. The plants are established. We've fixed the elevation and around the curbs, and it's just fantastic. So if you can go one more. So kind of what I talked about a little bit already. So the contractor timing, some of the big issues with this are we're a pseudo-state agency that has a fiscal year, and I have to have everything done and in place before the end of September. And then I also, I think I'm really cool, but I don't have as much power internally to make these kinds of big landscaping decisions, because I'm affecting a lot more on campus. So there's a lot of internal coordination and a lot of stakeholder engagement, and that process can get delayed because we have to talk to engineering and physical security, and our executive management needs to approve as well. So even though I have a budget and a really good idea, it still has to go through a really long process, which honestly, like, you have to start that a year before, honestly, if you want to get everything done in an FY dealing with weather. Also, another thing is that this isn't my full-time job. I also do a lot of education and outreach within our watersheds. And the busy season for education and outreach and festivals is also the growing season when we need to plant. So it's very hard if you have that kind of duality in your job, or if you're pulled in lots of directions. Being project manager isn't something I went to school for. I've learned it all in the School of Hard Knocks here at the job, but I've really loved the way it's turned out. So that's why contractor, timing, growing seasons, fiscal year. Another huge thing was our I don't know how to write a bid packet at the time of this project. This was my very first one. And so I've learned a lot and tried to talk to different people. But it really, that part, don't gloss over it. That part really, really matters, because that is what you can take to the contractor when they don't do it the way that you had envisioned it, even if it was the way that they interpreted on the bid packet. So one of the examples was this. It was really frustrating to work with this contractor, because again, I wanted to go out for bid and have someone run it all and be project manager and coordinate the growing of the plants, the planting of the plants, the install of the plants. But if I have the plants coming on a truck from Houston, and I know that they can't plant it unless it's scooped out and the right elevation, no one can do but it's going to rain on this day. So this contractor was a separate one, a bigger company. And what I like to term, we do meso projects. So we're not residential scale, but we're not $1 million scale. We're in a tiny little window that they're like, oh, we'll send someone if we can, or oh, we'll do this. So the pressure on my end to line up everything and get it all done isn't the same pressure that my contractors have if I didn't write it into the bid packet and the scope. So they came out and they did the work, but they wouldn't come out and give me the final elevation survey, right? Why would I plant everything if we have to change the elevation? Or if they also changed the designs a little bit. They moved the ponds around, they went further into the trees they were supposed to, and then they carted off all the soil instead of raising up the elevation. So there was a lot of things I couldn't do because I didn't know how many ways it could get messed up. So those are my lessons learned for this, is that you can definitely keep the planning, don't skimp on planning. And if you wanted to play the video, how much? So this is, I just like to do it because he gets stuck in the mud, and it made me laugh, and it brings me joy when I'm having a really bad day. That's when he gets stuck in the mud. So after this video, you can keep going. Even today, it's just gonna make and it's just gonna make me laugh. Yeah, he should have stayed on the plan. So you can keep going. The design phase is really critical for internal stakeholders or your community if you're doing this in an HOA. So stakeholder building is really important. Design, planning, getting everything done, and then construction. My dad had a construction company when I was little, and so I just thought that I knew things about construction. But again, with that bid packet process, trying to find allies for that and learn a lot about that before you start a project, I would really suggest that. Vendors, again, because of that meso project scale, the residential landscapers are great. They have the talent, but it's very hard for them to go through our CivCast process and our budgeting system and get the insurance they need. So it's very hard for them to scale up to work with a state agency and go through all the formal processes. And again, the bigger companies, they it's not going to have the price tag to attract the bigger companies. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to partner with different groups or agencies so that we can do more training, more certification, like Green Pros, and more things so that we can train people to be in this niche market, because there's really no vendors that bid on the big projects. It's very hard to find people. And then final inspections, that's also really key to know exactly what you want before you sign off on their last check. And then I've already talked about everything else. So you can go on to the next one. So we're going to switch over the next case study. How much time do I have?
Let's do like 7 more minutes. Okay. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. So we're going to do maintenance lessons learned. I think one of the comments that are popping up on my screen, I think one of the comments was about the my budget line was it's about this, like, so like this year and last year, 150,000. That's only to build it. All of the maintenance goes over into our facilities department, and I'm in environmental. So I can help design it and install it and get it on board, but maintaining it, that's a whole other ball game and a whole other department, which is exactly what this next piece of the talk is about, is maintenance lessons learned. And then again, we'll do our EE&O discussion really quick at the end. And then I wanted to talk to you about our new Beacon network. So you can go. Thank you. So this is just a refresher after looking at all the really fun videos of wetlands, of the different areas on campus and the different BMPs. And I wanted to stop on this slide just for that quick minute, because I had talked about the different contractors and that the maintenance goes to someone else. So, or another coworker, right? So what we ended up having to do, because there's not vendors that are landscaper, there are a lot of landscapers, right? But to do this size of campus, and I just saw that comment, I think it's about 7 acres. That is, we have a little bit more there, but this rainscape area probably is about that. And we could find someone that would do the handwork and weed and maintain and use. We didn't really need a lot of chemicals. That was one of the selling points, is that we didn't need to fertilize like we would with turf grass or do as much herbicide, because we didn't need it to be a monoculture. We could have a little bit of diversity. So we could find someone that could do just one or do those beds. And then we kept another contractor that would just do the mowing all around, like the mowing on the levees, the mowing on those turf and green spaces. And then the wetland also was a little bit different. And then our purchasing requirements also necessitate some weird, it's a lot of discussion. So from a purchasing and an accountability standpoint, they want whoever installs the plants to maintain them for a year, so that they have that guarantee of doing the right thing the right way, giving us good quality plants. So from their side, I totally get the liability of it. But from our side, if the person who bids on doing the installation isn't the one that's currently maintaining campus, then the lines get a little blurry. So those are the pictures that we'll see a little bit later, is that we had one person or one company just doing these highlighted areas. We had another company that was mowing. We had another company, so the overlook area, that purple flower in the rain garden, we had just done a replanting and spruce up on that area. So we had a different company just for that corner. And then we had another company that did the cisterns. So those yellow squares, they did the cisterns. And again, the one that did the courtyards, the cistern water was connected to the courtyards. And then we also had our facilities that did things. And then we also had a separate contractor for pesticide. And we also had a separate contractor once a year to wash windows and do things. So it got to be a little too much to manage. So if you go to the next slide, one of the contractors at the time we worked really, really well together. So it's a lot of education and relationship building with your landscaper. And he ended up, that picture on the left, tattling about the other landscaper. So the guy in the backpack is not assigned to this bioswale. He is not supposed to be there, and he is essentially emptying his backpack full of herbicides into the bioswale. So he's essentially tattling on the other company. So if you want to do a lot of more drama in your life, definitely have a bunch of contractors that fight over where their edges are. On the right-hand side is a picture from this spring. It's very, every time we get a new crew, we have to go out and talk to them and walk it. We actually decided that one of our solutions is to walk it with our contractors every month to go over issues and weeds and what isn't a weed and what we want. So this is a spring cutback, but it's the irises, which are in fact labeled with a QR code. So these irises they still bloomed this year, but they looked very horrible. So even though we had worked with this company on the right-hand side for almost 2 years now, every time they get a new crew in, they decide what they know is best. So you could go to the next slide. This is a little, not even little, it's kind of the same area, but the one on the right is the end of the bioswale, and the picture on the one on the left is the end, and the picture on the right is a little bit upstream of it. Essentially what happened, I know I'm running out of time, is that we had worked with a company and a smaller company for several years. He knew what we were doing on campus. I had explained a lot of things, and it was great. We were trucking along. So the water was ponding here, and we decided instead of having them mow it, that we can make a bioswale. But what ended up happening is he posted about it when he was done on his Facebook, and it was a bioswell, which is a really cool, I think it's swell too. It's really cool. But what he had done is, again, traditional upland landscaping. And so he had piled enough mulch that instead of being a concave bioswale, it was convex. So it's still, we are not getting, it's really hard to maintain that and do it, right? It's functioning beautifully. The plants are functioning beautifully, but it's not capturing the water that we had wanted. So you can go one more. All right, yeah, you can keep going a little bit more. So these are just different shots through it. Another huge piece for me is the edging. So you can see that there's a huge gap in dirt along the edge of the they're still bioswales, these rock channels. So that's where the contractors meet. And the one that did the mowing was able to use weed eaters and Roundup. So this is them, instead of weed eating or pulling things or letting even the grass grow a little bit. So ecologically, I want them connected. What happened in reality is that the edge kept going farther and farther and farther back. So mostly defeating the purpose of having grass in the first place, because there's nowhere grass. So that's another huge issue we're still trying to deal with. You go on more. Buffalo grass getting driven over and mowed. It's supposed to be mowed once a year, and they mowed it anyway. So that was this spring. Super fun. If you could go on more. This is a whole other case study. It's our rain garden. If you come for a tour, I'll give you all the information about our rain garden. Lessons learned. You could go. Yep, that's another one. Basically the Typha, we didn't plant that, and we have to do a lot of maintenance for that. So again, contract language is really important, and then your goals for the site, if you're going to use any chemicals or fertilizers, is really important, and then really clarifying, are they going to replace any plants that might fade over time. And again, the example I gave was that 2021 concurrent contractor issues. So if you go one more. This is something we tried with our contractors. It's what we have to submit to the city of Fort Worth. It's in English and Spanish. And so far I haven't gotten a single contractor to fill it out. So, but I have it and we do try to work with them. And there's a ton more maintenance issues there as well, but I did highlight like the weed control, cutbacks, irrigation, leaks. And if you go one more. The only way we've been able to address some of these things is education. There's not like fines or anything we can do. And then switching to a new company isn't really an option again, because our vendors are limited. The skill set is limited, and we just need a market for this, for green stormwater infrastructure in the region. We're going to be doing it a lot more. So we're working on how to do trainings for that. We do a lot of education for the public, but also for professionals in this area. And then in order to justify things, we have to maintain the recognition and awards is important for our board to justify some of the money and time. And it's a demonstration project, right? I'm a scientist, so I want to learn what works and doesn't. And that is not always a good sell. So we have to find data and metrics and make sure that we can also do that side of it for the public facing side. One more. I don't have time to do this. I normally don't. But again, maintenance versus monitoring, the photos, who comes. So if you're going to build this, also building into a monitoring program as well as a maintenance might be a really good idea. So that you have what you need to write awards and go for grants and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify there's a little bit of difference in those two aspects of it. Yep. So be as specific as possible. Don't do the cheapest bid. Please don't do it. I don't know if that's good justification when you are comparing things. And then the more you can have relationships, engagement, and your internal and external collaboration and stakeholders, the smoother it's going to be, I promise. But it is a lot of work. I wanted to just show that we have been recording some of our metrics for this. So in 2021, we kind of started the program. And then through the pandemic, we shifted a lot to virtual. So we are increasing the number of events, which is the blue line. And so we've had 20 events, almost 500 people for this year. And then at the end of the year, we'll add in all of the online components, so the video and the story map that we've done in our virtual tours series. And we also have lessons and curriculum for the area as well. So that'll add about 2,000. The 2,000 of there is our virtual component for this. But we do try and do quality over quantity. So that's why we have that low number right now. But this QR code is what I put as the story map, and I also put that link in the chat, and I'll go back to the chat as well. I know I'm missing a lot of questions. So I have the link in the chat if you wanted to go to the last slide. And I wanted to talk about our blue-green infrastructure network. I'll talk about it more offline, but the QR code is also the link that I put there. If you're interested, we're going to start this network, and we want it to be contractors and homeowners and HOAs. We want it to be everyone coming to the table to discuss their lessons learned. We think we're going to meet quarterly, so we're going to have a kickoff workshop where we can start this networking. So if you go in and you sign up for that when we haven't got the registration, this is just the interest. If you're interested, sign up. And that's all I have today. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was fabulous. We appreciate you sharing with us. Lots of great questions coming into the chat. We have a few minutes before we go on to our next presentation. I did see one asking about scale, which you had addressed, but we're also kind of wondering, does the cost change based on the scale of the project? Is it linear? Is it exponential? What's your experience with that?
Ooh, that is a very good question. And I don't know if I've crunched that linear or exponential before. I think the only, haven't crunched the numbers. So my only lesson learned is my experience, like the answer is my experience. So I don't know if it's true for everyone. So we had worked with a contractor for several years. He was like a smaller crew, maybe less than 10 people. His bid on maintaining all of campus all at once was $130,000 a year a couple years ago. And then the big mega company that we have now, their bid was $72,000. And even though I pushed really hard and I said, I don't even know if they were the lowest bidder, but they were one of them. I'm like, we don't want this because every time they get a new crew, we're gonna lose things and lose plants, and it's gonna take a lot of my time and facilities time holding their hands every single week, which is what we do. But we couldn't get past that hurdle, so we had to do it the hard way first, so that we can have that metric. Our district, once they saw. And it's good to be fiscally responsible. I'm not saying that, but they saw the $50,000 difference in cost, and they said we can't do that. So yeah, another solution would be, if I could, and I've been lobbying for it, is getting in-house staff or technicians and training or apprentices, and try and get people to be hired in-house. But I think the preference right now is contractors. So I don't know if that really answered your question in scale, but that's currently what the big project is. It's to maintain the whole campus, including some mowing.
Great, thank you. So we'll go on to the next presentation, but we have more questions. We'll have time at the end for further questions as well. And then Michelle has put her email on her slide. So if your question doesn't get answered, you're still welcome to email her and utilize her as a resource. I want to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Charriss York. She's the Program Director for Texas Community Watershed Partners, a program of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service through the Disaster Assessment and Recovery Unit. Charriss leads the Green Infrastructure for Texas, or GIFT team, that works with communities to find nature-based solutions in Galveston and Harris counties to implement on-the-ground examples of green infrastructure and stormwater wetlands. York joined the TCWP team in 2006. In 2008, she took over the stormwater program, and in 2020, she became the first of 2 TCWP program directors. Charriss holds a BS in biology from Truman State University and an MS in botany from Oklahoma State University. And Charriss, welcome. You're welcome to begin your presentation.
Thanks. We can go ahead and just skip to the second slide there. So as she mentioned, I'm with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and you guys might be familiar with my colleagues. We have offices in 252 of the 254 counties in Texas, and those county offices are responsible for programs like 4-H, the Texas Master Gardeners, the Texas Master Naturalists, and other things like that. I am not a county agent. As she mentioned, I'm part of the Disaster Assessment and Recovery Program, and you might think, Charriss, why are you talking to us about green infrastructure and disasters? And so we consider ourselves a blue sky program. So when there is not a disaster, so before and after, we are working directly with communities to help them identify and address whatever specifically water-related disasters they might be coming. And so if we are doing our job right, then we are helping the first responders have an easier job when the next issue comes down the road. And so we are very focused on green infrastructure. And so we are based in Houston, and the 2 case studies I have for you today are in the Houston area. But as Michelle mentioned at the beginning of her talk, we are in the same watershed as you guys. You know, we are downstream, we are Region H, we are at the end where we are taking whatever comes down from the rest of Texas. And so it is important to us what you guys are doing up there. And we're hope that some of the lessons that we have learned we can share with you, because we do have a lot of similarities in our soil types. You guys have the blackland clays, we have our gumbo clays, we have a lot of similarities that I think, and actually, Michelle didn't name any of her plant contractors, but I know who she used, and that's actually one of the plant contractors we use down here for our wetland plants as well. So there's a lot of similarities. So if we go to the next slide. Because we are part of Texas A&M, the main focus of our program is education. We exist to bring the university education and knowledge to the public in a way that is useful and relevant to them. You guys very well likely might be familiar with my colleague who's based in Dallas, Dr. Fuad Jabber. We work with him a lot on projects. He's been involved with actually both of the projects I'm going to talk to you about today. And so between Fuad's shop and our shop, we work all across Texas with communities however we're able to. Aside from education, we try to get on the ground projects. Mostly these are demonstration projects, but if we're trying to reduce flooding and improve water quality, the way to get that done is to actually build the projects. And so we want to work with communities however we can to get them all the way to those actually constructed projects. And then finally, research. It's like Michelle mentioned, we need those metrics and that data to back up what we're saying. And so one of the projects that we're going to talk about today, Exploration Green, we have some ongoing water sampling happening there to get an idea of the water quality of that site over time and if this wetland is working. So we're able to share that data with both the local decision makers and the general public to kind of continue to make the case for these practices and to show that they are working. So next slide. Michelle talked about this, so I won't hit too much on it. But really what we're talking about with these green infrastructure practices are related to development and managing that water and that stormwater, trying to capture, treat, infiltrate, or store water as close to where it falls as possible. And one of the things that I think is really important to think about is that these practices have to work in conjunction with our gray infrastructure. We're not looking at these practices to replace the gray infrastructure. It's figuring out where they are appropriate, where we can use them, and how they can fit together with the gray infrastructure, with what we already have in place, with what we're constructing, so that we can get the benefits that come from both types of infrastructure. And that these are infrastructure projects. These are engineered projects that are part of that overall system, and we need to think about them that way. So our next slide. And this, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but I think just from hearing Michelle and from hearing me speak, there's a lot of different names that people use for these practices. And it's continuing to evolve and to change, and there's not a whole lot of difference between them. If you want to get picky, there's some nuance, but you've already heard today, blue-green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure, low-impact development, nature-based solutions is one we hear a lot. It tends to be federal agencies who use that term, but at the end of the day, we're all talking about working with nature to capture, treat, and store that water that's running across. And so don't get bogged down in the different names and the different things that we're calling it. At the end of the day, we all have a very similar intention despite what we call it. So next. And then finally, why should we be considering these? It's because of the multiple benefits that we get from the projects. And I think you'll see some of those as we move through the two case studies that I have for you today. But it's important to remember, because when we're thinking about things like the cost and the benefit and the value of some of the green infrastructure versus the gray infrastructure, we have to have a big picture view and mindset of everything that we are getting from these projects, not just the management and movement of stormwater, but also the water quality and the habitat, the benefits that we get to people and to local residents, and all of those are pieces of the larger picture when it comes to these types of projects. So next. Okay, we're going to get into two case studies. The first is Exploration Green. Okay, next. There we go. Yeah, okay, one more. We're going to drag you guys all the way down to Houston. There we go. So Exploration Green is that little red tree in the bottom right-hand corner. So we are in suburban Houston, about a mile from Johnson Space Center. So it's outside of the loop and outside of the Beltway, and all the way out in suburbia. And so this area was developed in the 1960s when Johnson Space Center came online. When Johnson Space Center was first built, it was out in the boonies. There was nothing around it. It was open space. And I think a lot of you probably have areas like that in your community that are being developed. And right now they're open space. And so back in the 1960s, there was not a lot of thought given to drainage infrastructure. Texas was flat, it was wet. It looked just, those conditions have not changed over the last 60 years. However, nobody planned for that water and that flatness because we had so much space. It's fine, the water will go somewhere. But as the Space Center grew, and as the area around it grew and development happened, all of a sudden we started to have, not all of a sudden, slowly and over time, we started to have real drainage issues because we were not managing that water well. So let's go next. Yeah, so this is a view of what this area looks like now. And when I look at this aerial, what I see is typical suburban development. We see single family detached homes, we see fairly large roadways, we see lots of impervious cover, whether that's roadways or parking lots or rooftops, and that has led to increased flooding, degraded surface water quality. Every water body in this area is listed as impaired by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, mostly for high levels of bacteria and low levels of dissolved oxygen. And in general, there's a lack of green space. And so because of this flooding issue, the Clear Lake City Water Authority, who is the entity in this area, who is tasked with taking care of both the drinking water and the stormwater, started to explore issues of solutions for the flooding issues that they were seeing. And so looking around the community, there was a lot, they were getting a lot of input from residents that they wanted to see some sort of, additional parkland or more areas, or could we use some of these wetlands they were hearing about, and how could these things fit together? And so next, they were able to, one more, identify a golf course. So back in the 1960s, the height of living and what everyone wanted was to live on a golf course. And so golf course communities popped up around Johnson Space Center. But over time, less people were interested in living on the golf course. The golf course was not being utilized as much. And so it had really become an eyesore. It wasn't being used for anything. It was defunct. And so the Water Authority saw this as an opportunity, and they were able to use their power of eminent domain to purchase this golf course. That was after a lot of studies were done, conversations were held with the public about what they wanted to see and how it could look like, and they came up with this master plan. Next. So this is the master plan for Exploration Green. It's almost 200 acres of what was previously golf course that's been re-envisioned as a stormwater detention and nature park. So part of this project is about 40 acres of constructed stormwater wetlands, as well as a 10-foot wide concrete hike and bike trail, native tree plantings, and tons of different types of habitat for suburban wildlife, things like bats and birds and bees. And we even see alligators and nutria and things like that in this area. So we're going to talk for just a minute about some constructed stormwater wetlands and what makes them different from a natural wetland system. So that's our next slide. So Michelle mentioned a little bit about the constructed wetland that they had built at their site. And I want to talk about how they're different from a natural wetland. So these are very engineered systems that have some very specific requirements that we look for in them. So because they are stormwater detention, we need to make sure that they are deep enough to hold the water. And as Michelle mentioned, there's permit requirements. They need to hold water for a certain amount of time, not hold it for too long, make sure releasing that water. There's all of those components that need to be considered. From a water quality perspective, you want to hold the water long enough that the wetland plants and the biofilms and all of those components of the wetland have time to actually filter and treat that water. So the image on the right and the different colors, the dark blue is what we consider a deep pool. It's usually about 2 foot deep. And we're looking to hold water there most of the year. So this gives a spot for any of the fish or anything like that that find their way into the system. Even in the summer and a drought, when things are getting really dry, we have a deep spot to hold that water and a point of refuge for those species. We're also looking to move the water intentionally through the system to give us a longer residence time for treatment of that water. And so there's some shallow zones and some intentionality to how the design of the water flows through there. But then we also have plenty of room for that to fill up and to be inundated for short periods of time, up to about 72 hours while that water draws down. And so to make sure we're getting that residence time, we also have very specific outfall structures or weirs with calculated orifice sizes so that we're getting the drawdown time that we want so that the water is leaving and it's ready to fill up the next time we have a storm event come through. One of the other really intentional things about these constructed wetlands is thinking about the planting plan. These are not a wetland out in the outside of town where we're just looking to pull in, ducks and waterfowl and that sort of thing, where we're planting on 10-foot centers and straight lines and we're just, throwing the plants in and not worried about what it looks like. We are building these in people's backyards where we're inviting folks to come and to be a part of it. And so we have to be very intentional about the plant palette that we're picking, what it looks like and how we're installing. And so that can be things like making sure the first vegetation that goes in are things that are quick growing and are going to cover the soil and prevent erosion, but also looking for our flowering plants. The things that look pretty, the things that are going to flower at different times of the year. Michelle mentioned the irises. We use a ton of irises. They bloom in the early spring. And so they give us lots of color, but then also they add some interest with the different colors of their leaves and the different design. And so we're planting usually a fairly small palette of plants, maybe say 15 different species. And also we plant in groupings, small clusters of plants that are usually mixed a couple of different species together. And actually one of the best ways to create some of that randomization is to work with volunteers, especially high school students, because they don't like to follow the directions that you give them anyway. And so they will randomize your plantings for you pretty quick. And then over time, those plants will figure out where it is that they want to grow, and they will come in and you'll get a pretty interesting wetland if you're kind of intentional about how you begin that. So I think that's all I want to say about some of the specifics of a stormwater wetland or constructed wetland and how it's a little bit different, and some of the things you might consider during the design process. So, okay, we're going to skip to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to go back to Exploration Green now. And I told you that Exploration Green used to be a golf course. So I have a couple of pictures for you. This is, so I should say that it's a 5-phase project. Phase 1 began construction in 2017. And actually phase 5 finished the construction in September of this year. The planting is still ongoing for multiple phases, but the actual construction of the ponds and things has been completed. So this is phase 4 pre-construction. So you can see some of the trees, some of the open spaces that were the golf course, and there is a channel that has always been there as part of the golf course. And so we'll go to our next slide. And this is what the slide looks like post-construction. So you can see that we did lose a fair number of those large trees to make space, but you can also see there's a lot more room for the water to go now. That channel has some more depth and some more intentionality. And in fact, I'm standing on a road taking this picture, so that's part of the reason why that channel is there, is so that we can continue to go pipe the water under the roads into the different phases as it moves. So the water is flowing away from us through this system into the next phase. This also has not been planted with the wetland plants. It has a few of the native trees that have been planted, but you can see they're still pretty small at this point. But this is very early in the planting phase. So next. Okay, this is phase 5. It was the last phase that was constructed. So this was a little bit earlier this year. You can see some of what's happening under the water. The water is kept really low at this point so that they are able to excavate and get what they need to. So you can see some of the pipes and whatnot. There's not been any sort of seeding or anything done on the slopes. At this point, it's still an active construction site. Since then, they have seeded the slope. We do use a mix of native seeds. One of the things we've had with the contractors is getting them to understand the timing of that planting. It's not, ryegrass or some sort of grass that you can throw out at any time of the year and the grass will grow. It needs to go out at certain times, and it's going to take a while for those native seeds to establish and to grow. And so we've had some issues with erosion, and we've had to go back in and seed a couple of times on some of the phases while educating the contractors about the appropriate time to plant those seeds. Okay, what do we got next? Okay, so this is phase 4. So I'm hopping around the phases a little bit to show you the different kind of the succession of the project. So that was a brand new construction. Here is one that's a little bit further. We're into the vegetation process here, so you can start to see some of the wetland plants. You will notice that there is a fountain. We do aerate this pond when needed. Because we are on the coast and it gets pretty hot, the general rule of thumb is if the air temperature is above 90 degrees, we have a system of sprinklers and bubblers to help maintain a constant dissolved oxygen level in the water. And so that's why you see that. So this is phase 4. It's kind of, I would call it like a baby wetland at this point. We have the ponds built, we're started planting the trees and the wetland plants, but it's still kind of a bit of an ugly duckling, in my opinion. And some people would say, like, Charriss, I think this looks okay. But we'll move on to the next picture, which shows you what a mature wetland looks like. So this is phase 1, where the planting started in 2018. So this photo was taken in 2023. So we're 5 years down the road, and you can see what that mature vegetation looks like. There are areas close to the sidewalks where it is mowed regularly to maintain sight lines and to keep that feeling of safety next to the trails. But as you move further away from the walking trails, it's allowed to be a little bit more natural, have some of the larger and taller vegetation, which attract that wildlife and whatnot. So it's a combination of some of the more mowed and manicured areas and some of the more natural areas. So let's go to the next slide. So to give you, rehash some of the statistics of this, it is in Houston, about 40 acres of wetland and 200 acres of parkland. One of the key components of this is that there was a ton of partners. The Clear Lake City Water Authority owns the property and managed the construction, but they quickly realized that there were a lot of components of the park that were outside of their jurisdiction. Things like managing trails and emptying trash cans and things like that were not part of what they were assigned to do and what they wanted to do. And so the Exploration Green Conservancy was created, and this is a nonprofit who is focused on the maintenance and the education and the park component of this. So creating this conservancy also opened the door to apply for different types of grants, things that the Water Authority was not capable of applying for on their own. This nonprofit could. And so there's been a lot of funding come in through Texas Parks and Wildlife Parks grants, foundations, and other groups like that that have helped fund the park components of it, not just the wetland or the drainage components of it. And then our office with the AgriLife Extension, our job has been the lead on the wetland component. So we actually grow and install all of the stormwater wetland plants that are part of this project. And so they all have a provenance of within 50 miles of the project, so that we're using things, vegetation that is used to being here and will survive. And we're also protecting the genetic integrity of those wetland plants here in Texas. So next. Okay, overall cost. The entire project from the Water Authority is about $43 million. On top of that, there's been about $7 million in parks funding that has come in for about $50 million for the 200-acre project. It has been paid for all by local funds. The Clear Lake City Water Authority is a taxing entity, and they took bond issues to the ballot. The community voted yes on, and that is how it's been paid for. So all of the purchase of the land, all of the excavation, the design, all of that from the flooding and stormwater component has been paid for by those dollars generated from a local bond. There's also been over 15,000 volunteer hours contributed to the project. That's through tree planting, wetland planting. We have tons of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts who are doing Eagle projects and Gold projects, building things like birdhouses, bee habitats, and things like that we're able to add into the area to really enhance and provide more areas for the wildlife. And at the end of the day, this site manages stormwater for an 8,000-acre watershed that is home to 16,000 homes and businesses and 30,000 people. So that's a lot of area that we're managing and protecting with this project. And one of the essential components of this is the Water Authority put this entire project under a conservation easement, which is held in perpetuity by the Galveston Bay Foundation. And they did that because they realized moving forward, because it is an elected board, that the folks who started this project could be voted out at any point, and the intent of this project could change. And so they put it under a conservation easement so that it will continue to be a nature park and to be used like this for a very long time to come. And it cannot be sort of redeveloped into apartments or housing or anything like that. So let's go to the next one. So another key component of this project is the flood control and the benefits we get from that. So the picture on the right is Exploration Green Phase 1. This is the spillway. So the what you can't see in this picture because of the angle is this is actually where the outflow of it is. So the water's coming towards us in this picture. That's what it looks like on the left. On the right is August of 2017, which might not be ingrained in your mind quite the way it is in some of ours, but that is when Hurricane Harvey came to visit. This is part of the area that got historic amounts of rainfalls. We're talking 50 plus inches of rainfall. And you can see that image on the right, that the spillway is overtopped. We hit our emergency overflow, but the water is still fully maintained within that system that was constructed. So those homes in the back did not flood. And so over 100 million gallons of water were held in Phase 1 alone because it was the only phase. It was partially constructed. It was about 80% at the time. It was the only phase that had been constructed. But it stopped 150 homes and businesses that were previously flooding did not flood during Hurricane Harvey. And the only difference is that this project has been started. And so that was a really great advertisement for what this project could do. And the community was really excited about that. And they asked for the construction timeline to actually be decreased so that they would be protected sooner. And because it was paid for by local bonds, the Water Authority had the funding and they were able to increase or shorten the construction timeline. So this was originally envisioned as a 15 to 20-year construction project. It started in 2017 and it finished this year. So they did all of the construction in 6 years. There's additional planting and things like that that need to happen, but the bulk of the actual construction is done at this point. The Water Authority has brought on an individual that trying to remember what they call him, but his job is to oversee the maintenance of this, do invasive species removal, work with the contractors to make sure that things are getting done correctly. But some of the stories that you've heard from Michelle, we have similar stories. The pond management group that they brought in who said, oh, we have this special chemical that we can put on these cattails that you don't want, and it will kill just the cattails. No, it won't. They took out huge swath of the wetland plants that we had worked with our volunteers to plant because there's not a chemical that's going to kill just the cattails. And so we've had a fair amount of hiccups along the way with that as well. So that is the 5,000-foot overview of Exploration Green. You can look up the Exploration Green Conservancy, or also we have a case study that FEMA wrote after Hurricane Harvey that I will share with Alyssa, and she can make available to you guys after this webinar if you want to know more about the project. We're going to shift gears. In the last few minutes that I have, I'm going to tell you guys about two much smaller constructed stormwater wetland projects we have in the city of Houston. These are with the MD Anderson hospital system. So these are in, it's not technically downtown Houston, but it's the part that most people would call downtown Houston with the high-rise buildings in a very urban area. The same intentionality and thought about constructing a stormwater wetland went into these projects, with the idea of having deep spots and shallow spots and water that's flowing through there, and thinking about the vegetation. So in this picture alone, you can see there's a variety of colors, a variety of plants that give you different heights, different leaf shapes. You can see some of the flowers and things. And so there's a lot of intentionality to make this wetland look aesthetically pleasing. So we'll go to the next slide. There we go. So MD Anderson has a general approach with their landscape, with their facility in general, thinking about health with every component of their system. And so whether that is how they're dealing with patients or what their rooms design look like, but also down to the way that they design and they maintain their campuses. So they're not using chemical fertilizers and pesticides, so they're reducing the patient's exposure to things like that. And so it only made sense that it would those goals would translate into how they are managing their stormwater. So you can see this is a very small project. It's a 0.6 acre wetland. The parking lot, all of the, if we're looking at the image at the top, that is the parking lot, and those black lines show the storm drains. So the water drains from the parking lot through a traditional grate into those storm drains, which then drain into this stormwater wetland, this very small stormwater wetland. And at the bottom, you can see what that looks like. So this is right after construction. So you can see that deep pool at the end, which is where some of the sediment and things are able to drain off of. And then you see a higher that's dry right now. And so that's a wetland shelf that gives us more room to plant the wetland plants that's a little bit shallower and provides some more treatment area. So I think the next picture shows us some different images of what that looks like. So on the left, we actually brought out a group of high school students and had them help us plant the wetland. And on the right is about 6 months after it was planted, and you can see a lot of those wetland plants starting to grow in and to cover. I don't have a more recent picture for you. This was in, I think it was 2019 when it was planted, but I don't have a more recent image than that, but the wetland plants are a lot more grown in. But some of the feedback that we've gotten from ND Anderson is that, you know, these the outfall of this still goes into the storm drain system and into their gray infrastructure. And I think it's this facility. They actually have an oil separator downstream from this, further in the pipe system, that they used to have to maintain pretty frequently and clean that out because everything that was coming from the parking lot. Since they built the wetland, they've actually been able to reduce their maintenance of that because the wetland is taking a lot of that out of the system. And so it's working in conjunction with their gray infrastructure. They're able to reduce some of their maintenance on their gray infrastructure and increase the longevity of that infrastructure by adding this green into the mix. So that's just one example of how the gray and the green can work together. So we have one more quick view of another building on the MD Anderson campus. So there is the wetland. The picture on the left shows it a little bit earlier and its stages, and the picture on the upper right is a couple of years later as those wetland plants have really grown in. One of the things that they've been able to do is take plants from this wetland and move them to the other wetland sites and kind of use these as on-site nurseries to grow and to use that same vegetation elsewhere on there. So that helps reduce the cost for additional projects if you're not having to buy the plants, if you can just move them from one location to another. And then you can see in the bottom right some of the educational signage that they've been able to include to explain what these projects are, why they're here, and kind of how they fit into that larger goals of the MD Anderson Hospital system. So this one is also very small. I think this one is about 1/4 of an acre. So we've looked at everything from 1/4 acre wetlands to 200-acre wetlands. Today, these are just one example of green infrastructure, how it can be used in different types of communities and what that can look like. So I think we have one more slide. At the end of the day, one of the things that I think is really important is changing the way that we think about things like our stormwater infrastructure, especially if we're looking at things like detention basins. So often those are put in the back of the buildings, they are fenced off, and they are seen as eyesores and things that are just taking up space. But if we can change the paradigm, if we can think about these as an asset, it's like the rainscapes that Michelle was talking about. You know, viewing this as an asset as something that we can work with, not as something that we just have to kind of throw out there and it's another requirement we're trying to check the box of. If we can be a little more creative and thoughtful about this, we can actually create these fantastic multi-use facilities that are available for the people who live there and really bring asset and value to our communities, aside from the stormwater, the water quality, the flooding, and all of that. They actually become amazing habitat for people as well. And so I will leave you guys with that. I don't know if we have time for questions or whatnot, but that's just an overview of a couple things that are happening in Houston right now.
Thank you so much, Charriss. That was very enlightening, wonderful presentation. I did see a question come in for you about if you have considered sediment forebays for the wetlands, and you believe that that would save on maintenance in the long term.
So it depends on the watershed and what is flowing into that system, if we consider forebays or not. For Exploration Green, we have not, because that watershed is almost entirely built out at this point. There is very little construction happening. There's very little land available for construction. And so the amount of sediment that's coming in is very, very minimal. And in fact, we see that when the area floods, the sidewalks are actually situated and such that they're frequently inundated when we get big rains. They flood the sidewalks. We do not have a lot of sediment happening on top of the sidewalks. And so we did not use the forebays for sediment in that project. If it is a watershed where there's a lot of active construction, or we know that there's a lot of areas that will be constructed, then yes, we definitely suggest putting in some of those forebays, some of those areas for the water to slow down, the sediment to fall out, and then the water can continue down its pathway. And then when the maintenance comes, times for maintenance, you have a much smaller section that you're cleaning out. So I think it's really important to know what's happening around and take that into consideration when designing something like a stormwater wetland.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We are nearing the end of our time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. As a reminder, I will be emailing the links to the slides. I will include the resource that Charriss had mentioned that I'd be happy to send that out as well when I send out that email. You'll receive a link to the presentation as well as the presentation slide. If you did not RSVP, but you would still like to receive that email, please contact me at anox@nctcog.org. I am also putting a link to a survey in the chat. You may also click it on your screen. This will give us a chance for you to share honest feedback, which will help us improve our future webinars. So I really, really encourage you to check that out and let us know what you think. I want to go ahead and thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much to our listeners, Michelle Wood-Ramirez and Charriss York, for taking the time to share with us today. Our webinar is over now, but have a great rest of your day. Thank you.